The year was 1776. While distant colonies cried for liberty and the thunder of revolution echoed across the eastern seaboard, the Ozark Mountains remained untouched, wrapped in ancient silence. Here, the Pruitt family carved out their living in a clearing so deep in the forest, even sunlight seemed reluctant to enter. Samuel Pruitt, a man hardened by war and toil, had built their cabin with his own hands. His wife, Eliza, tended to the hearth and the children with equal devotion, though her eyes often drifted toward the dark line of trees, as if measuring some invisible threat. Their three children, James, steady and responsible, Abigail, gentle yet perceptive, and little Thomas, full of restless curiosity, found joy in what little they had. But beneath their laughter, a heaviness stirred. Neighbors rarely visited, muttering of curses and strange happenings. For while the rest of the world fought for freedom, the Pruitts waged a quieter war, one bound not by muskets or flags, but by shadows too dark to name. The three children were the light of the homestead, each one a reflection of a different piece of their parents. James, nearing manhood, carried himself with his father's determination, though he softened it with patience. He often took responsibility for gathering wood and mending tools, learning the art of survival early. Abigail, though only 12, seemed wise beyond her years. She cared for her younger brother with a tenderness that belied her age, often weaving stories to comfort him at night. And then there was Thomas, only 6, with a mischievous grin and a heart full of questions. He would wander the creek, chasing frogs and staring at the way the light bent through water. Yet in recent months, even their play had changed. Their games ended abruptly at dusk, when the forest seemed to lean closer, its branches groaning like restless sleepers. Thomas once asked why the woods whispered at night, but Abigail only pressed a finger to her lips. She didn't know, but she felt, deep in her bones, that something watched them. The Ozarks were not empty. A scattering of families lived in its folds, but the Pruitts were different, or so people said. At the trading post miles away, stories clung to their name like moss to stone. Hunters claimed they'd seen Samuel standing in the clearing, speaking as though to someone invisible. A farmer's wife swore she once spotted Eliza burying glass jars along the riverbank, muttering words in a tongue she did not recognize. Whether truth or invention, these rumors grew with each telling. To the neighbors, the Pruitts were touched by some curse. To Samuel, such gossip was nothing more than envy of his independence. Yet Eliza could not dismiss the looks, nor could she deny her own trembling when the sun dipped. The children noticed, too, how her hands shook as she barred the door each evening, and how she never let the fire die, as if darkness itself might consume them. One evening in late summer, a knock startled the family. Strangers rarely found their door, but this man was no ordinary traveler. A soldier, weary from marching, his uniform tattered, eyes hollow with the weight of war. Samuel welcomed him, offering bread and a place to rest. As rain beat down, the soldier spoke of battles in the east, of blood spilled in the name of freedom. But his voice lowered when he turned to the Ozarks. "The war is not the only fight," he said, his gaze fixed on the dark woods beyond the window. "This land, it remembers. It hides more than wolves." His words silenced the room. The fire hissed as if offended. When dawn came, the soldier was gone, leaving only muddy footprints fading into mist. James could not shake the warning. Neither could Abigail, who dreamt that night of eyes glinting among the trees. Eliza Pruitt carried a truth heavier than any rumor. Years ago, before she married Samuel, she had fled her village under accusations of witchcraft. She was no witch, yet when sickness struck livestock and crops failed, people pointed to her knowledge of herbs, her whispered prayers over the dying. She ran, finding sanctuary in Samuel's strength, but the stain of suspicion followed. Out of desperation, she had buried jars filled with herbs, carvings, and tokens in the soil around their home. Charms meant not for harm, but protection. Still, she dared not confess this to Samuel. He was a man of Scripture, one who trusted only the words of the Bible and the sweat of his brow. If he knew, she feared he would see her as those villagers once had. And so she carried her secret, watching as the land grew restless, praying her jars could hold back what sought them. Samuel was a man molded by hardship. As a younger man, he had fought against enemies of flesh and blood, men who bled and fell like any other. But here, in the heart of the mountains, he faced something he could not strike down with musket or blade. When the crops failed and game grew scarce, Samuel's faith turned to ritual. Each night, he stayed longer in the barn, whispering prayers that grew more desperate, sometimes bargaining aloud. James once heard him plead into the shadows, "Take me, but leave them." It frightened the boy, though he said nothing. The father who once seemed unbreakable now stood hunched, gray with worry. Even his eyes looked different, haunted, as though some unseen force had laid claim to him. Autumn came with storms that howled through the mountains. On one such night, as rain lashed the roof and thunder split the sky, the children awoke to a sound more terrible than the storm itself. A scream, high and piercing, carried from the forest. Samuel leapt from bed, rifle in hand, while Eliza clutched the children close. James pressed his face to the window and thought he saw movement, something massive slipping between the trees. Samuel returned, drenched, his face pale. "Nothing," he said. But Abigail, holding her little brother, whispered, "That wasn't nothing." She had seen her mother's expression in the flicker of lightning, recognition, not surprise. Days later, the unimaginable happened. Thomas, full of boundless energy, had gone to the creek to chase frogs. When Abigail called for him, only silence answered. She found his tiny footprints in the mud, leading toward the woods. Then they simply ended. No drag marks, no signs of struggle, just absence, as if the earth had swallowed him whole. Panic consumed the family. Samuel stormed through the forest until his voice broke. Eliza collapsed, clutching Thomas's blanket. Neighbors heard of it and shook their heads. "The curse," they muttered. Abigail refused to accept it. That night, she sat by the window, listening to the wind, and for a moment she swore she heard Thomas laughing, faint and far away, as if the forest itself carried his voice. Sleep did not bring peace. Abigail dreamt of Thomas standing by the river, pale moonlight on his face. In his small hands he held a jar, the same kind she had seen her mother bury. "Find the truth, Abby," he whispered. "The family must be free." She tried to reach for him, but the river rose, pulling him away. Abigail woke in tears, convinced it was not just a dream but a message. In the morning, she demanded answers from her mother, her voice trembling with equal parts fear and fury. Eliza's silence was heavier than words. At last, Eliza broke. She told Abigail the truth. The jars were not spells but desperate protections against something old that dwelled in the Ozarks, a spirit that once demanded offerings to keep peace. She had hoped the jars would fool it, appease it with tokens of prayer, but it wanted more. It always wanted more. As Eliza wept, Samuel overheard from the doorway. His face hardened, betrayal cutting him deeper than any blade. "You've brought this upon us," he growled. Eliza fell to her knees, pleading, but Samuel's silence was worse than rage. That night, James saw his father walk into the woods alone, calling out into the mist. The boy's heart froze as he realized his father was not hunting, he was bargaining. The night Samuel entered the forest, a storm brewed without rain. The trees bent as though bowing to something unseen. James, unable to sleep, followed at a distance, clutching a lantern. He saw his father fall to his knees in a clearing, rifle cast aside. "Take me!" Samuel cried into the mist. "Take me, but give back my son!" The woods answered with silence. Only the wind groaned like 1,000 whispers. When Samuel finally rose, James gasped. His father's hair, once black, streaked with gray, had turned nearly white. Samuel walked back without a word, his eyes hollow. He returned home changed, refusing to speak of what he had done, but the silence in him screamed louder than his cries ever could. At dawn, Eliza awoke to the sound of small footsteps on the porch. She ran outside, and there he was, Thomas, mud on his feet, his clothes damp, but smiling as though nothing had happened. The family embraced him with tears, relief overwhelming suspicion. Yet Abigail noticed things the others did not. Thomas's eyes no longer sparkled with mischief, but glowed with something unreadable, too old for his 6 years. At night, she awoke to the sound of whispers. She crept to his room and found him standing at the window, murmuring to the trees. "They're my friends," he said when she asked. His words chilled her more than the autumn air. While bathing Thomas by the creek, Abigail noticed a strange mark on his arm, a dark, branching scar that had not been there before. It curled like a twisted root, pulsing faintly beneath his skin. When Eliza saw it, she dropped the cloth and wept, recognizing it as the spirit's claim. "It has not taken him," she whispered, "but it will." Samuel, furious, declared they would abandon the homestead, leave everything behind. But when they packed and set out, the path curved impossibly, always returning them to their cabin. It was as if the mountain itself had bound them in chains of soil and stone. Desperate, Samuel sought help from nearby settlers. The neighbors gathered, fearful and angry. Some demanded the Pruitts be driven out, fearing their curse would spread. Others simply turned away, unwilling to share in their fate. But one man stepped forward, Tyanita, an elder of Cherokee descent, who lived by the river. He listened without fear. "This mountain spirit is old," he said. "It is not evil, only bound. Long ago men made a pact with it, but your silence has broken it. Secrets feed it. If you wish to end this, truth must be spoken and the spirit faced, not with fear, but with love." His words struck Eliza deeply. For too long, she had hidden her past. That night, under Tyanita's guidance, the family built a great fire in the clearing. The flames roared high, sparks climbing into the black sky. "The spirit listens," Tyanita said, "but only when you stop hiding." One by one, the Pruitts stepped forward. Samuel admitted his pride, that he had tried to fight shadows with his own strength, too stubborn to share his weakness. Eliza confessed her secrets, her jars, her shame. Abigail trembled but admitted the envy she sometimes felt, wishing to be free of burdens her brother never carried. And Thomas, his small voice breaking, confessed that the whispers in the woods had felt like friends, even when they frightened him. Each truth seemed to feed the fire, which burned brighter, as if the mountain itself inhaled their words. But confession was not enough. "The spirit must be faced," Tyanita warned. "One of you must enter its realm." Samuel stepped forward, but the flames hissed, sparks striking him back. Eliza tried, but the fire dimmed. Then Abigail, heart pounding, took a breath. "I'll go," she said. Her family protested, but Tyanita placed a hand on her shoulder. It must be the one untainted by fear's chains. With that, Abigail walked into the mist beyond the firelight. The air grew thick, and the forest seemed to close around her. Inside the mist, Abigail saw visions, her father broken, her mother accused, her brother swallowed by the woods. The spirit's voice rose, deep as the mountain itself. "Give me your brother," it said. "He is marked. You will be free." Tears streamed down her face, but Abigail shook her head. "No, take me instead." The spirit wavered, its form shifting like smoke. It whispered temptations, power, peace, release from fear. But Abigail stood firm, her small hands clenched. "My family is my freedom," she cried. Silence followed, heavy and endless. Then the mist cleared. She awoke in her mother's arms, weak but alive. When Abigail opened her eyes, Thomas was beside her, the mark gone from his arm. The air felt lighter, the woods no longer oppressive. Birds sang for the first time in weeks, and game returned to the valley. The neighbors, who had gathered in wary anticipation, watched in awe as the fire dimmed naturally, its work done. The Pruitts were no longer whispered about with fear, but spoken of with reverence. Samuel, the man who had once hidden his tears, wept openly, humbled by his daughter's sacrifice. The days that followed were filled with healing. Samuel learned to smile again, setting aside his iron pride. Eliza, freed from secrecy, shared her knowledge of herbs and prayers with neighbors who once shunned her. James grew into a young man, guided by responsibility, but softened by empathy. And Thomas, though changed, carried an innocence reborn, no longer drawn to whispers in the dark. Most of all, Abigail became the heart of the family, her courage a light that reminded them all of what they nearly lost. The cabin, once heavy with fear, rang again with laughter and warmth. Years later, when Abigail had children of her own, she told them the story of that autumn in 1776. She did not speak of curses to frighten them, but of truth and love to guide them. "Fear grows in silence," she said, sitting by the fire. "But when we share our burdens, when we stand for one another, even the darkest mountain can let us go." The macabre mystery of the Pruitt family was never written in history books. It was too strange, too dark for some, too miraculous for others. Yet in whispers and fireside tales, it endured. A story not of horror, but of hope, that even in the deepest shadows, love can break the oldest curse.